Hi, I'm Kat Allman with the Open Source Programs Office here at Google. I am pleased today to have Angie Byron, a Summer of Code alum and developer with Lullabot, and Geoff Butterfield with GLEF, the George Lucas Educational Foundation, here today to talk about Drupal development and implementation. Please welcome Angie and Geoff.
Hi. So as Kat mentioned, my name is Angie Byron. I guess I look at here. And I'm with Drupal project. I got my start in Drupal 2 years ago, actually, as a Summer of Code student, funnily enough. I did Summer of Code in 2005 as a student and then kind of went on to become completely obsessed with everything to do with Drupal. So now I'm on the documentation team, the security team. I'm on the board of directors for the Drupal Association. I code core patches and I test people's patches and I do modules and themes. And so I'm kind of, basically, if there's a way to be involved in Drupal, I'm involved in Drupal in some way. So, but I'd like to thank Google very much for that opportunity, because without them, I definitely would not be here today. So, and now I work for a company called Lullabot, and we make sort of high-profile Drupal websites for large corporations and things like that. So, so let's start with the obvious question: what is Drupal? Has anybody in here ever heard of Drupal before? Everybody, awesome. Okay, so some of this will be old news to you, but for the benefit of the people who have not used Drupal before, it's three things. One, it's a content management system. And what that means is basically it's like a website in a box where anybody who needs a website built can use this tool in order to edit web pages without any HTML knowledge and stuff like that. The core of Drupal, which is the thing you download when you download Drupal itself, has a whole bunch of features in it. Search engine friendly URLs are kind of important to the Google folks and stuff. Taxonomy is a big feature that we have that a lot of other CMSs don't have, and that gets us a lot of people to pay attention to it. Multi-site installations are kind of cool. That basically allows you to run several Drupal sites off the same code base, which is nice for maintenance and that sort of thing. If those features aren't enough for you, there's also over 1,200 contributed modules that you can use, and those will add functionality from event calendars to image galleries to Talk Like a Pirate Day filters and things like that. So that's pretty cool. The second thing Drupal is a content management framework. And what this means is it's an API for managing content, users, sessions, forms, and everything. And essentially, the content management system part of Drupal is sort of a proof of concept of what the framework can do. So in a way, it's sort of like something like Rails or Django, but it comes with a CMS built on top of it, in a way. These are some of the features of the API part of Drupal. jQuery is one of the big features. That's a really robust, lightweight JavaScript library. Then there's things like installation profiles that allow you to bundle up a Drupal site that's configured just the way you want it, and then deploy it on multiple different sites with all your changes and things like that. And then the third thing Drupal is this community. We have a pretty large community. This is a picture taken at our last DrupalCon, which was in Barcelona about 2 weeks ago. And every release, our community seems to double in size. This has been kind of an ongoing trend since the beginning. So 6.0 will be out sometime in the next, well, it'll be out when it's done, but it'll be out sometime probably towards the end of the year or early next year. So here are some statistics about our community. We have over 840 code contributors, so that's people contributing patches to Drupal core, also people with CVS accounts that have contributed modules and themes and things like that. There's over 160 local user groups spread throughout the world. We had over 430 attendees at our last DrupalCon, which is interesting, this number, because our first DrupalCon that we held in September of 2005 had 20 people. So we've kind of been going up and up as things go on. So we have over 200,000 users on Drupal.org. There's over 3 million lines of code between core and the contributions repository. Core itself is really lightweight and small. It's around 40K. And we had 52 Summer of Code mentors for the 20 students that we were allocated. And thank you for that very much. So. Oh, and there's about 100,000 downloads per month of Drupal at this point. That number seems to keep going up as well. So who's using Drupal out there? Probably some people that you've heard of. Open source projects use it, like Ubuntu Linux. Also the Eclipse project, OSI, they use Drupal as well for their websites. Then there's Greenpeace, other activist organizations, Amnesty International uses it. A lot of political campaigns in the US use it. Hillary Clinton's supporters have kind of a community-based website that they're using as a grassroots platform to launch her campaign. The Onion uses it. Hey, other humor sites use it, like including AskANinja.com and things like that. Music companies starting to take note. This is Sony Music Box. Warner Brothers also uses Drupal for their homepage website, and a bunch of individual artist sites are using it. Sony has a Drupal multi-site platform, which all of their new artists and existing artists that need new websites are on. So like Ozzy Osbourne, Tori Amos, Daughtry, the second runner-up to American Idol or whatever. But all of their main artists are starting to go to this platform because it makes it much easier for them to maintain the code base. Twit, This Week in Tech, and other podcasting sites use Drupal as their framework. 43 Folders, this is Merlin Mann. He's a big personal productivity guy. Also Tim Berners-Lee is another person using Drupal for blogging. Lifetime Television, other television networks include CBC, MTV, Fox. Adobe, Sun, and IBM are all big tech companies that have taken an interest in Drupal. This is the Flex Showcase site, where Flex is sort of it's sort of like a programmatic Flash kind of thing that you can do over the web. I don't know a lot about it, but it looks cool. But they chose Drupal to do their showcase site because they really like the features and the community stuff that it added. Oh yeah, and these guys use it too. Moving right along. So why does everybody use it? Well, the first thing is it's free software. It's free both as in freedom and free as in beer, so that's always good. So for, in practical terms, that means there's no vendor lock-in, and it means that there's no upfront costs. So that makes an attractive option to like nonprofits and things like that. It has a lot of features. We kind of talked about that already. It gives you a lot of control. You can customize the functionality in Drupal to your precise needs. You can customize the look and feel of it to whatever your designers have come up with. And basically, unlike other CMSs, you can turn off the stuff you don't want and only turn on the stuff you do, so you're not stuck with this big glomp of stuff, which is nice. It's extensible. Drupal uses what's called a hook system to allow you to inject at any point and alter the way that Drupal works. So there's over 50 of these hooks that you can cut in, and you can either write your own custom modules that say, for example, change the way the user login process works, or you can just add additional information to content and things like that. Maturity. Drupal's been around for 7 years, over 7 years. Even though the release number-wise, it's Drupal 5, there's actually been 12 releases of Drupal. We did point releases for a little while and things like that. So there's been a lot of thought behind the code base. Security is another big reason. We have a dedicated security team that handles not only the Drupal core itself, but also handles contributed modules, which is something I don't think any other project has. And something that's really big that the security team focuses on is education of developers. So we do a lot of work like writing up documentation and writing scripts that will automatically scan your code for SQL injections and things like that. And here's what IBM had to say. They compared Drupal with these five other CMSs, including Mambo and Typo3, and then came up with Drupal as the one on top in user control, extensibility, scalability, themability, and our code is very standards compliant. Excuse me. So how does Drupal work? Since everybody in here has used Drupal, I guess this is going to be old news, but I'll just go through it quickly. From an architecture standpoint, you've got your Drupal core down here. And basically, that gets you the basic functionality that you need in order to run the site. So it gives you like user management. It gives you the ability to localize stuff. And it gives you the APIs that you need in order to build modules. And then modules will extend the functionality that the base Drupal gives you. So it'll add new features, it will modify the way Drupal works. And you can either download, you can turn on modules that come with core. So for example, the user profiles and forums modules come with core. You can download extra ones. So if you want an event calendar, you can download the event module. And you can also code your own custom modules using the API. Let's talk a little bit about the hook system, because this is pretty much where the power of Drupal lies. Basically, a hook is a place where Drupal asks, hey, I'm about to do something here. Would anybody else like to cut in and modify this? So for example, if I'm displaying a list of permissions in the admin panel, I might do something like, say, module invoke all perm, which means go any modules that implement a hook perm, I'm going to call you and then generate a list of permissions. So for example, we might have blog module and contact module that implement a blog underscore perm and a contact underscore perm, and then they return an array of the permissions that they define. And this is all based on naming conventions, which makes it really easy for new developers to pick up. And basically what happens is that array gets passed into the permissions, and then it generates its lists that way. So it's really easy for modules to define their own permissions and then have fine-grained control over who can access what. The node system, so node is a funny word. That's how we call content. We call it nodes, just because, I don't know, because we like confusing people. No. So we start with a node. Basically, somebody at some point was smart and said, forum topics, blog entries, polls, announcements, they all have kind of the same properties that are innate to all of them. They all have a title. Most of them have a body. They all have who created it and when, things like that. So let's take that and shove that into a node. And then let's allow for creating individual, sort of instances of nodes. So for example, you can have an article which, in addition to having a title, a body, an author, and so on, defines a copyright field. So you need to define where this article is from and who owns the copyright. And a poll, for example, will define choices and results and stuff like that. And then in addition to that, through the hook system, upload module, for example, could add file attachments to articles. And comment module can make it so you can comment on either articles or polls. I just want to quickly run through some of the killer modules in Drupal. Killer modules. These are some of the modules that we end up using on a lot of sites that are really powerful and we're pretty excited about. So the first one is CCK. So this basically allows you to add fields to node types. So here's an example of an album. So you see, I'm going to use this. Yeah. we've got an artist, which is a node reference. So in other words, you're referring to another node in the system. So we have artist nodes, and we're referring over to those. We have an album cover, which is an image. We have a album release date, which is a date. Number of discs is an integer, and things like that. And CCK will take care of doing all the database manipulation in order to add the fields where they need to be. It's also smart enough that if you share a field among different content types, it will automatically normalize the schema for you and put those fields in a separate table and do joining and things like that. It's really cool. In addition to that, once you add a field here, that will also show up in the admin interface when you go to create a piece of content. You'll see that it's added the artist selection here, and here's some taxonomy stuff and things like that. Views is another really powerful module. The way I explain views to people is basically like anytime you need to create lists of stuff. Basically what it is it's a query builder with a GUI. And the GUI kind of looks like an airplane cockpit sometimes, but it's really powerful when it's new. And essentially what you do is you can select what fields out of the content to show, how you want to filter it, and how you want to sort it. So for example, here's a view showing a bunch of music videos. So they've just taken the thumbnail view of a picture along with a title, so that's pretty straightforward. You can also have something like this, which is an alphabetic pager of artists by the name that their artist starts with. And then finally, you can get kind of more complex, and you can say, okay, I want the top rated things, and I want to dynamically pass in what node type, so what content type those should be. So for example, we've got what's the top rated album, what's the top rated video, and what's the top rated song for this artist. And Geoff will be going into more detail about CCK and views in a little bit. Panels is pretty cool. Panels is sort of a web layout framework. So it's basically geared towards end users who don't know HTML and PHP but want control over where their sidebars are and things like that. Panels gives you an interface like this where you have rows and columns laid out, and you can control like how many rows across it is and how many columns. And they can be merged and all that sort of thing. And then they can add any kind of block, menu, view, a piece of content, anything like that. So they can, with a click of a couple buttons, change the featured homepage story to something else without having to bother you to go in and start editing things as the web person. So that's really nice. Organic groups is another kind of cool module. This basically allows you to have private or public sub-sites. So for example, this is the Summer of Code group on our groups.drupal.org. And we have it set up so that this group in particular is public, but we also have a mentor group, which is private. So anytime that you post in this group, you have the ability to mark something as public or private. And the way that gets controlled is whoever's on the subscriber list. And the subscriber list looks like this. The manager of the group can appoint co-administrators. And then those administrators have full control over the content within that group without giving them control over the rest of the site. So they almost get like their own private area to brainstorm about things and stuff like that. Actions and workflow. This is kind of a powerful combination, but it's kind of confusing, but I'll go through it and hopefully it makes a little bit of sense. But basically gives you fine-grained control over the publishing workflow of nodes. So you start by defining a workflow. So for example, this is the editorial workflow, which has steps like, adding media and editorial review and publish to employees only and things like that. Then they have an interface where you can define for each step who can move it from this step to another step. For example, any author of the content or basically anybody can move it from I just created it to editorial review. But only an editor can move something from a later stage back to editorial review. So example, you messed up your typing, I'm kicking it back to you, you have to figure it out, and things like that. And then in addition to that, Actions lets you say, when I move a node from creation to editorial review, what happens? And you can assign these discrete pieces of functionality to fire when a workflow transition happens. So for example, this is going to alert the editors that the fact-checking is complete. So that means that they've gone through the effort of going through all the things, they're kicking it up to them for review. So this might send an email to the editorial team. And you can say, remove a node from all groups because you don't want it public-facing until the editors get the chance to look at it and things like that. So it's really, really powerful. So that's all the stuff Drupal can do right now. What does the future hold? Well, Drupal 6, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, just went into beta 1 like 2 weeks ago or so. So we're working really hard to get that out. Some of the killer features in that are internationalization. Drupal's had like the interface translatable since way before my time, so a long time. But to translate content on the site, you always had to install a separate module. So we built that into the core now so that you can have both an English and a French version of the same article if you're in Canada, for example. OpenID is in core. OpenID is a distributed identity sort of thing where you can basically, instead of creating a login at 500 different places, you can authenticate to your one trusted server, which will handle managing your identities and things like that. Drupal was one of 3 projects to integrate OpenID into its core first. So at OSCON this year, we received a $5,000 bounty for that from the OpenID folks, and that was pretty cool. Update status module is in core. What this module does is it informs you when your modules or themes or core itself is out of date, and it will tell you whether it's just an updated version or whether it's an actual security release. So that's really important for protecting our users against any kind of problems. And Actions module got into core. So this means that modules can define their own set of discrete actions, and then those can be fed into something like, say, the workflow module or the trigger module, which is new in 6. And that essentially allows you to assign actions to hooks. So whenever a user registers, you can send an email to the admin. Or if somebody publishes content with Viagra in it, you can delete the comment and then ban the user automatically. Drupal 7, so this is our next release, and after Barcelona, everybody was like, oh, we got to figure this all stuff. So some of the stuff we're excited about in Drupal 7 is PHP 5. We're dropping support altogether for PHP 4. Actually, anything before 5.2.3, which probably you guys don't use much PHP because you're Google and use Python and stuff. But PHP 4 is bad, and PHP 5.2 is pretty nice. It's starting to look like an actual real language. It's got object orientation, exceptions, things like that, which people usually get shocked when they find out that people are programming on things without those types of things. But it works. So one of the things that we can do with PHP 5 is web services. They've got really nice XML handling in PHP 5. So we basically want to make it eventually so that any Drupal site can essentially act as sort of like a Facebook type of application, where it exposes an API so that visitors to the site can program functionality to be included and things like that, which is really important because that's clearly the way the web is heading, is involving your users in the direction of your site. Asset handling. This is a mock-up that one of our members has done about how to handle dynamic image manipulation right in core. So things like resizing, cropping, and including things inside the editor and things like that. And one of the things we're also planning to do in Drupal 7 is work a little bit on the usability because we have a few of those kind of people that we want to try and turn around. So for more information, here's a list of links. The Drupal handbook is basically our documentation, has a bunch of information in it. The api.drupal.org site is our developer documentation, so you can read up there on how the APIs are laid out and things. Drupalbook.com is the website for the Pro Drupal Development Book, which is on Apress. It's a book that it's really good for explaining Drupal concepts to people who know development but don't know Drupal. The IBM Developer Works series, basically IBM wrote a 9-part tutorial on Drupal and how it works and how they integrated it and things like that, which is really, really cool. And then finally, there's Dries, I'm not going to pronounce his name right, Dries B., our project lead. He has a tag. He has a blog, and he tags all of the high-profile sites with this tag. So if you go there, you can see other sites that were out there. So let's see it in action. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Geoff Butterfield. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see. I think, give me just a second while I get my, actually, can I give that to you for just a second?
Yep.
Get out of that. And, actually, let me give that to you if you don't mind. Excuse me just a second.
So a guy walks into a bar. No. Oh, knock, knock. Control freak. Okay, now you say control freak who?
I liked it.
It's such a great joke,
Okay,
It just works.
Well, as long as I'm doing this, I'll share with you the knock knock.
Okay.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting.
Moo!
I love interrupting cow.
I have a 3-year-old. Sorry. All right. So my part of this, I think this one's active. Thanks, Angie.
Okay.
My part of this is sort of subtitled "This Old Website," because what I'm going to show you is the Edutopia website, which is the official website of the George Lucas Educational Foundation. Quickly, just to share who we are, our basic mission is to share innovative educational resources with anybody who has an interest in education. And to that end, and my flash isn't working. To that end, try reloading that. No flash? Oh. Normally, this would be fantastically beautiful. Oh, let me try Firefox. There we go. So this is part of, we have 2 publications. We have a magazine, which has sort of lighter content, and the idea is that we drive people to our website, which has more robust, deeper information. Excuse me just a second. There we go. And so Angie talked about a few things. I'm going to share with you. Let me just log in. Actually, I think I even am logged in. Let me just share sort of how our site is built. Angie mentioned a few things, modules being one of them. And let me just show you. A little bit of background. We serve about 150,000 unique people per month. We primarily are known for our articles and our video and media online. To put this site together, this site was already a site in motion, and about a year ago I realized that I was going to have to add functionality that I didn't have the capacity to add in by myself. We really have one sort of core developer, me, and a few other people that help put in the articles and maintain sort of the intermediate HTML, a little bit of PHP. But as far as serious development goes, it was me. So I needed something that had the tools I needed that I could kind of get off the ground right away. So the site looked, with the exception of the control panels here, the site looks very much like you see it today, with a few exceptions. The first killer module I want to share with you is, Angie referred to it earlier, the CCK, which is short for the Content Creation Kit. And what this really did for me, and let me go back, I'm going to show you the content types that I have on the website. And you can see it's a great big list of things like the articles, which I'm looking right past. Oh, there we go. Edutopia articles, which is down here. We have a new set of resources rolling out this week called, as part of our green package. So there's a green content type. Just household stuff, job postings. We have a job posting site. The ability, and of course, actually, Edutopia Media, which is probably one of our more critical pieces, and the keyword overview. Being able to create all these different content types really gives us a lot of flexibility when it comes time to make each page have the information that it needs. Let me go to, for example, this is a media page, and actually let me stop this before this runs any further. It's pretty straightforward. It has a little rate this media, and it has a link to a taxonomy feature, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But, you know, very straightforward. Because it's a content type, I was able to just use comments. It's just built right in. We do have a lot of folks that this particular article doesn't have any right now, but most of our video pieces have at least a half a dozen comments. Let me go to back to an article. Find one here. So here's an article. Now, because this is a content type, and Angie, do you have the laser pointer? That's okay. Because, well, here, I'll stand here and do this. Because this is a specific content type, I was able to create a template that said, all right, every time we serve up an article, I wanted to do a couple of things. Thank you. I want the breadcrumb, because our breadcrumb was sort of pre-existing. I want the breadcrumb to behave in a certain way. In this case, I wanted it to put the keyword, or excuse me, the topic to which it's connected as part of the breadcrumb. I wanted that to be reflected in the left-hand navigation. I wanted it to be able to pull in this related links box when appropriate. Because this is an article type, it was very easy for me to say, okay, whenever there's an article type, do this. Without having to impact on a lot of different other article types. Angie also mentioned views, which I showed you already the media node type. By using views, I can pull these node types together and present them in this list. Made it very easy to do this. Other places I do this, I mentioned that this is a magazine as well. All of our articles are keyworded in such a way that if I click on magazine, the view can go in. You're not seeing it up in the URL, but the keyword is being passed to this page, and so it says, oh, find me all the articles that are in issue 2007 and lay them out accordingly. And so that's what you see here. So the combinations of content types and views makes it very easy to put these kinds of, I was going to say rapid prototyping, but there's nothing prototypical about this. I put this together, took a step back, and my staff went, yeah, that's what we wanted. Great, we're done. So I mentioned CCK, I mentioned views. The third sort of killer module out of this project, I'm trying to think of the best place to do this, was the taxonomy module. We had built up, the organization originally was centered around 11, well, it was 12, and now we're down to 11. I think it's even lower now. Sort of 11 big ideas: assessment, community partnerships, digital divide. These are all topics that are important in the areas of education. So we wanted all of our material to fall somewhere into these categories. The taxonomy module was the first thing I looked at that said, oh, this is the only software I've found at this point that lets me do this really easily. So as you can see, I pulled up the community partnerships sort of overview. Right now, this is still static. In the future, this will probably be a view of some kind as well. I'll just say, show me what's new in community and have it generate this page. When you go to an article, then you can see that the topics are also over here on the side. So this particular article is a member of project-based learning, technology integration, community partnerships, assessment, et cetera. Let's see, I was going to show you, let's see. Let me just show you. So this is the entry screen for the article we were just looking at. You can see your title at the top, very obvious. Author, this was very simple. This was another node type. You may have noticed earlier in the presentation, there was when I was showing the list of content types, author was a type. It was very easy for me to create that record and then link to it using the node reference function. And let me just think of somebody else's name here. How about Diane? There's more than one Diane. So I can reference my authors quite easily this way. My deck. But down here, you start seeing where the taxonomy comes in. This first one is actually not being used yet. This is, we have some teacher materials that these are just in the process of getting hooked up. But you can see down here, here's my project-based learning, my primary topic, taxonomy term. Here's my magazine taxonomy term, which remember, helps me with that view, helps me pull that information in. Secondary topics, which gets used in that little local nav area I was talking about. Table of contents. All these different taxonomy functions give me a lot of flexibility to sort of mix and match content as I need to. And then again, you'll see the node reference as we talked about. Some extra search terms. One of the nice things about Drupal is because it's so extensible, I was able to add a field where I wanted terms to get pulled up by the search engine that weren't necessarily in the article. And that literally took me, I think, 2 lines of code to just say, when you're building the search index, also look at this other field. So those are my sort of big 3. Let me go back to administration and go back over some of those other modules again. Because modules is really, there's a joke among one of Angie's group that if you wait long enough, somebody in the community will build it for you. And I'm happy to say, for me, that's been true. As you can see, CCK is there. There's optional things in core, path. Let me just scroll down. I'm kind of looking for the big items. Here's a whole section of modules that I've written. Some of these are modules. Some of these are really just collections of code that I wanted to put in one place, so because it made sense logically. You can sort of see what they are over on the side here. When I'm looking, here we go. So down here below other, these are community modules that I downloaded and dropped in and saved me a ton of work. Probably our favorite one these days is path redirect. and Path Auto Alias, which I actually don't have installed right now, which made a nice search engine friendly URL for every article that got created and does it automatically. That was much appreciated by our editorial staff. Of course, things like paging. If I have an article, a lot of our articles tend to be overly long. So if we want to break them up into multiple pages, we can do that very simply without having to create more than one node. You know, each article should be a node by itself. And of course, the views module. Web form is also very nice. It just makes it very simple to create contact forms. We're using it, let's see, I'm not sure this is online yet, but let's take a look. We're using it to collect data about we have a new resource that's launching this week as part of our magazine called the Go Green Database. And you can see, again, this is a view. The Go Green records were simply a content creation kit type that I created. I pulled this view up, was able to pull all the pieces together that I needed. The views is very nice in that it makes it very simple to create search filters. Theming them is more of a challenge, but certainly possible. Add your resource here at the top is just a form created at the Web Content Creation Kit. And this took me, maybe half an hour to do. Once we had what we needed to put in there, it just made building a form really easy. The nice thing about it is it also then protects me from SQL injection, all the bad things that can potentially happen with forms. I've got the security team, helping me out on the back end there, so I don't have to worry about it so much. Actually, let me just show you that to you, since as long as we're here, you can get a sense for what that looks like. So again, this is the web form module, and you can see I was just able to create a type down here. And there's a whole list of, I can add a CAPTCHA or date, email, go down the list, type it in, tell it what I want it to do, and I'm done. Some other, let's see. Some other modules that are worth looking at. Let's see. Sure. Let me show you views. That's another one that, as Angie says, can look a little scary on first go, but it's really not. Let me just find it here. So, for example, I think I showed you the media page. And let me just find, or actually, let me show you Go Green, since we just built that. I'll go ahead and edit that. And this is the basic overview. So at the top, I just give it a name that's unique within the system, a little description. I want this to be a page. I'm going to offer it to the world. So I could just type in my URL there, and voila, it works. I want it to be a table view. I can show also full records. I can show little teasers. I can show a list. Or I can generate an RSS feed. Something that's nice to know that if you have the wherewithal to do it, you can take any of these views and really pull them apart and re-put them back together any way you wish, which is what I've done actually quite a bit with that Go Green view. I wanted to use the pager, so if I have more than 5 records on a page, it'll say next page, and back and forward. It handles all the navigation. I can say how many nodes I want to show on the page. That screen I had at the top with the artwork and the submit your information here, that just lives in the header here. So that was very easy to just generate, just simple HTML. I could also add a footer in if I needed to. And then below that, so here are all the fields that are part of that view. And it was very easy for me just to come in and say, okay, I'm going to look at all the different nodes or fields, I should say, that are possible, and I can find one. Let's see if I can find something that's somewhat appropriate. Well, this one's not, but I could say credits, and I add the field, and voila, it's now part of my view. Below that, I have arguments. If I needed, back on when I did the magazine index page, and I mentioned that you didn't actually see it in the URL, but there was a keyword being passed, which was the issue of the magazine. September '07 was this month's issue. So I can pass the argument in to the view quite simply, and the view is smart enough to go, oh, okay, he's asking for '07, and I can then use filters to supplement excuse me, actually, I'm getting sort of ahead of myself here. Arguments will then feed that value into the view code, and then it'll pull up. I'm trying to remember where I have that variable. Somewhere in here is that variable. Excuse me, I'm going to erase this field just before I forget. Filters. So at the top, that big green box where I said sort these records by any number of criteria. All those filters are easily generated here. You can see they're pretty straightforward. I only want things that are published. Here are my node types. Again, I have a big list, but I only want things that are in the green database. And for searching, I want to make sure that it gets everything, although it looks like we've left out Alabama here. So apparently there's nothing green in Alabama. We'll have to fix that. And you can see that these are all my various parameters. I don't want to show that to the whole world. I only want certain fields to be searchable, so I have my exposed filters, and these are the ones that were, again, in that green box at the top. And right now, I don't think I have any sort weight on here, but I think on the media page, I think I have them sorted by date. So, whatever was the newest, make sure we get that up at the top. So again, this is something that prior to this views module took me, I don't know, a couple of days to get this kind of functionality into a particular node type. Now with views, it's half a day and I'm done. I spend more time worrying about the theming than I do anything else. So again, here, let's get back to go green. And so there we go. There's our exposed filters up at the top. Here are the fields that we asked it to deliver. If I'd have left that, gosh, what was that field? What was the field I just put in there? Cost or credits or whatever it was. It would be in this list. So, going forward, when the editorial team comes back to me and they say, oh, we left out hat size. It's very easy for me to just come in, add the field, add it to the view, and I'm done. So we're about 10 minutes left. That's really just kind of a cursory look at some of the things that are on my particular site. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has questions specific about this site or about Drupal in general. We're here to spread the word. Anybody? Questions? Anybody?
We were that good.
Bueller?
Yes.
So I was wondering if you could compare Drupal's features to some of the other CMS systems. It seems like there are so many of them.
Let me. I was telling Angie this story yesterday, in that we had essentially. Well, there's a joke that goes around that says most content management system builders build their own system first, and then after a couple of years of doing that, they realize, this is just not the way to go. I did that, and so it was about 2 years ago I realized there was a whole feature set that I couldn't support myself. So I started going through the list, and I downloaded Mambo, which is now Joomla. I downloaded Plone. I downloaded half a dozen others. Mambo and Plone were really the only two serious contenders. Mambo didn't really have any taxonomy support, so that kind of ruled it out right away. Plone did have some taxonomy support, but to be honest, whatever it is that makes programmers look at something and say, this is the environment I want to be in, Plone didn't have that for me, and that's just a personal choice. Drupal was on my desktop. I had downloaded it. I was literally dragging it to the trash and thought, I downloaded it, I should probably look at it, and installed it. And the taxonomy support for me was the thing that came just, right to the forefront. Since that time, being able to take advantage of a lot of these other features has made that decision a good one. One thing that I can say these days is the documentation that's available today is much better than it was a year and a half, 2 years ago when I started doing this. Angie mentioned a book by A-Press, Drupal Development, I think is the name of the title, Matt Westgate, and I forget who the other author is. But a lot of the stuff that I struggled with was there in this book. Usually, concisely written, and if I'd had it 2 years ago, I'd have been done much, much sooner. That's sort of my 2 cents on it. I don't know.
Yeah, so in terms of content management systems, most of the time Drupal and Joomla are compared together. There's also WordPress, but that really has more of a focus in the blogging, single-user blogging space. Although you can do more with it, that tends to be their kind of niche. And then there's sort of systems like PHP Nuke, which is what I started on, and then I said, I'm never touching one of these CMSs again. Frig this, where their philosophy seemed to be, let's cram every feature that anyone ever asked for and not give you any way to shut it off, and that sort of thing. So the main difference that I've found from talking to the Joomla guys between Drupal and Joomla is that our communities have both kind of started from the total opposite way and approached the same problems. So it's very interesting. So for example, Drupal has, maybe 5 guys who can actually commit to core. And everybody else participates through patch submissions and stuff like that. Our community started out as a bunch of developers first, where we were a website to talk about web technology and stuff like that. And then that website became open source, and then people started working on it, and then gradually gained a user base. So we struggle with things like usability. We struggle with things like making things easy for people. We're like, oh yeah, you just click here and do this, and twiddle that, and click here and do that, and then shut this thing down here, and then do this SQL query in your database, and you're done. It's easy, And so we're sort of converging more on like, okay, well, let's step back and let's figure out how we can, improve our admin panels and make them look nicer and get our workflow more straightforward and stuff like that. But the advantage of a bunch of developers working on it is that our APIs are pretty solid. And we're also not afraid to break things code-wise as long as the data is maintained. So if some new technology comes out, we're right on it. We want to jump on the bleeding edge, get that into Drupal. And we've got a lot of, I'd say if we're like a pyramid, up until very recently, we have way more developers up here and then users were down at the bottom. Joomla is sort of the complete opposite of that, where they have a very small group of developers. They have maybe 20 people or so that are core kind of working on Joomla and making it better. And then all the rest of their users are users of the software. So they have a really strong focus in usability and ease of use and like making things really straightforward for people to pick up natively and things like that. And now they're moving in the direction of providing APIs. So like one of the things Joomla's working on is they're rewriting their entire code base because they spooned from Mambo, and so they're rewriting their entire code base basically to be all object oriented and things like that in order to kind of bring in more development interest and things like that. So that's the main difference between the two. Functionality wise, there's things Drupal does that Joomla doesn't, and things Joomla does that Drupal doesn't. So it's mostly a matter of comparing the needs and seeing which one fits for you. But in my experience, that's the main difference between the two communities. And eventually you're going to find that they're going to end up somewhere in the middle, at some point where we've got the functionality and the usability, and they've got the usability and the functionality, and then it's going to be a matter of which one floats your boat. So we like Drupal, though. Yeah. No. That was a good question. Any other questions? Yes.
Is it a coincidence that the names are so similar?
I don't know. We were first. No,
yeah, it might be more of an open source kind of a thing where you just have a name that's.
There's something about the ooh sound that's just so like cool. Exactly. I think something like that.
Yeah.
Well, Drupal is funny. So Drupal, the name Drupal is a weird name. It comes from, so Dries is from Belgium, and so he meant to register the domain dorp.org, which means village, for this big website thing he had, and he misspelled it and registered drop.org instead. And he was like, oh, cool, a 4-letter English domain that's still available. Oh, sweet, I'll take that, you know. So Drupal is sort of an anglicization of the word Drupal, which means drop in Dutch. So it's sort of like a weird thing. So yeah, so that's the story behind Drupal. I don't know what the story is behind Joomla. I think it's some sort of a greeting or something, but yeah.
Thankfully, at this point, when I had to go to my senior management and say, yeah, I found this content management system, it's great, I didn't lead with the name. You know, I went through all the features and why it was great, and then at the end I kind of went, oh, it's called Drupal. Because inevitably they always kind of glazed over and went, what? Drew what?
You also avoid showing them a scary alien head until they're sold on the feature set, you know. So. Cool.
Anybody else? Great. Well then, I think thank you very much.
Thank you.